The world is a stage. My vision returned like a bolt of lightning, a sudden searing jolt that snapped me back to reality. I found myself back on the stage, standing in the spot of light, its warm glow a fragile sanctuary. Not in the center, but at the very edge, teetering on the brink. One more step, and I would have been outside of its protection, swallowed by the darkness beyond. My heart lurched, a dizzying wave of disorientation crashing over me. I wobbled as my senses returned, disorientated, confused, my head spinning as if the world had tilted beneath me. The stage seemed to sway, the edges of my vision blurring with the aftershocks of my journey. I managed to regain my balance, my boots scuffing against the worn wooden boards, and pulled back to the center of the circle of light, its warmth steadying my trembling limbs. Relief flooded me, but it was fleeting, overshadowed by the weight of where I stood. The audience groaned with disappointment, a guttural collective sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Their decaying bodies writhed in their seats, skeletal forms twisting unnaturally, their tattered clothing hanging like shrouds. The stench of their rotting corpses was almost too much to bear. A vile, cloying miasma of decay that filled the air, thick and suffocating. I covered my mouth and nose with my arm, the fabric of my sleeve doing little to block the rancid odor. The smell clung to my clothes, rancid and disgusting, seeping into my skin. There was no escaping it, no way to shield myself from the grotesque reality of their presence. I steadied myself, drawing a deep breath despite the foul air, and stood up straight, my spine stiffening with resolve. I looked Ruthless straight in the eye, meeting his gaze without flinching. He was angry, his eyes filled with rage, twin infernos blazing with malice as he glared at me. I could feel his hatred burning through me like 1,000 needles piercing my skin, each one a sharp, stinging accusation of my defiance. His presence was oppressive, a storm of fury that threatened to crush me, yet I held my ground, my heart pounding but unbroken. "Why didn't you kill the creature?" he bellowed, his voice a thunderous roar that echoed through the theater, shaking the very walls. "You could have been a prince, a king. You could have had anything you wanted." His words were laced with venom, each one a temptation wrapped in scorn, but they stirred something deep within me. A spark of clarity, a refusal to bend. "I don't want those things," I screamed, my voice raw with conviction, rising above the din of the audience's moans. "I am a boy. I just want to play and have fun." The simplicity of my desire felt like a revelation, a truth I had nearly lost in the swamp's shadows. Ruthless approached the edge of the light, his demeanor shifting from angry to deceitful, his movements sleek and predatory, like a serpent coiling to strike. "I can give you those things, if that's what you want," he said, his voice smooth, honeyed with false promises. "Just step out of the light." The offer hung in the air, tempting and insidious, but I felt a surge of defiance, a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "I will not," I said defiantly, surprising myself with my courageous stance, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Ruthless's face contorted, his facade cracking. "This is my stage, my world, my creations," he roared, his voice a tempest of rage. "You have no power here," he continued, his words dripping with contempt, as if he could will me to crumble. A few audience members moaned and gargled, their decayed forms crumbling to dust, their hollow sockets staring blankly as they disintegrated. They were starving, their existence tied to the negativity I had once fed them. I had stopped feeding them with my negative thoughts, and slowly but surely they were drying up. Their power waning as mine grew. I felt safe within the circle of light, its glow a shield against their hunger. I wasn't afraid, not anymore. A quiet courage bloomed in my chest, warm and unshakable. I realized that I had given my power away, that I had allowed Ruthless to control my life, like a puppet on a stage, this stage manipulated by strings of doubt and fear. Now was the time to take that power back, to sever those strings and stand as my own master. "It is you who is powerless here. This is my stage, my world, not yours," I yelled at the top of my voice, the words erupting from me with a force that shook the air, a declaration of my reclaimed sovereignty. Ruthless puffed himself up, his frame swelling with fury, and marched around the circle of light, desperate to get his hands on me. His murderous eyes glared, twin beacons of rage, and his voice echoed around the theatre like thunder on a stormy day. Each word a crack of lightning meant to intimidate. "I can destroy you," he screamed, every sinew in his body taut with frustration, his hands clenching as if he could crush me with sheer will. But in that moment, something shifted within me. I didn't feel fear. I felt calm, a serene clarity that washed over me like a gentle tide. I recognized my own tantrums in Ruthless. The petulant outbursts of a child denied his way, and like Ogleflow laughing at my own fits, I wanted to laugh at Ruthless. For the first time, I saw him as powerless. A child like me, stripped of his grandeur. He was me, the angry, lonely, helpless me who thought the world didn't love him, a reflection of my own doubts given form. The realization was both humbling and liberating, a mirror held up to my own heart. My thoughts retraced the journey, each memory a thread in a tapestry of lessons learned, emotions raw and vivid as I dissected their meaning. The wizard who had relinquished his power to trinkets and magic, as I had done with my bag of tricks, chasing illusions of strength. The miner searching for his happiness in treasure, gold, at the expense of his inner light, watching it fades and die in the darkness of his obsession. Sweet, sweet meadow, who I loved. Her warmth bringing comfort and joy, yet teaching me that there was no growth in comfort alone. Comfort wasn't my goal, only a fleeting respite. The bitter cold hermit, consumed by his bitterness, turning everything to ice, yearning to consume me too. His chill a warning of what resentment could wrought. Butthead, attacking everything so no spark of light could survive, a force of destruction born of fear. The cavern, a place of safety from my own negative thoughts, yet a trap that could lull me into stagnation. The river of dreams, a seductive snare for the mind, promising escape but delivering only illusion. Bell and the tavern, a place of judgment, teaching me that all is not as it seems on the surface, that love can find you in the unlikeliest of places, hidden beneath prejudice. The island and the lava pit, where I learned to trust myself, to take responsibility, and to find my courage, stepping into the unknown with faith in my own strength. The Black Rat, a ship of misfits who found temporary comfort in like-minded creatures but was doomed to destruction, a lesson in the fleeting nature of false refuges. Ruthless, the theatre of corpses, promising me the world if I would only step out of the light and feed my negative thoughts, a tempter who thrived on my despair. The castle on the hill, a sickly representation of self-indulgence, its opulence a hollow mask for emptiness. And the swamp, where Ruthless tried to force me to kill my future self, to commit suicide, a final desperate attempt to sever me from my potential. All these thoughts and more raced through my head, a whirlwind of insight that felt like an awakening from a deep dream, each lesson a beacon illuminating my path. "This is my stage, my world, not yours," I said calmly, my voice steady, resonant with newfound authority. Suddenly, I felt the warm touch of friendship, a familiar presence that steadied my soul. Ogleflow put his hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. I had created the small crack needed for him to step through, a breach in Ruthless's dominion born of my defiance, and now we stood side by side, united in purpose. His presence was a lifeline, a reminder of the journey we'd shared, and my heart swelled with gratitude for his unwavering support. Ruthless began to weaken as the audience crumbled to dust at a rapid rate, their forms disintegrating into piles of ash that scattered across the seats. His bursts of rage shrank to nothingness, his power fading as they had no effect anymore, his voice a hollow echo. The circle of light increased in size, its glow spreading across the stage like a rising tide, and Ruthless fled, his form retreating into the shadows, unable to withstand the light's advance. As Ogleflow had once told me, positive and negative energy cannot occupy the same space, and the light was reclaiming this one, banishing the darkness. As the light spread out into the theatre, the seats began to fill with beings of light and glowing energy, their forms radiant and ethereal, pulsing with warmth and life. I could feel it pulse through me, energizing me, lifting me up, a current of joy that banished the last traces of fear. A smile grew across my face, almost as big as Ogleflow's, stretching my cheeks until they ached, a reflection of the hope blossoming within me. The audience, an army of beautiful light beings, began applauding me, their cheers and claps a symphony of celebration that filled the theatre with vibrant energy. Ogleflow lifted me onto his shoulders once more, and I wailed with surprise, a laugh bubbling up as he started dancing up and down the stage, his steps light and joyous, carrying me like a triumphant hero. He turned, and there, bowing behind us, were all the cast members from my journey, their presence a testament to the trials we'd faced together. The wizard, holding Caracas and the mouse, his eyes twinkling with quiet wisdom. The miner from the coal mine, his face smudged but hopeful. Meadow, radiant and kind, blew me a kiss, her gesture a spark of warmth in my heart. The hermit and butthead, their harshness softened by the light. Then I saw Belle, standing with a handsome man, her hand resting on a gentle swell. Pregnant, a new life blooming from her love. I almost cried, joy and awe mingling in my chest. The family from the island, their faces bright with gratitude, and Captain Cutlass with his crew of misfits, their rough edges smoothed by camaraderie. Finally, the king and queen, prince and princess, standing with Thistle and Thunderbolt, their regal bearing tempered by humility. On the very end was Horlick, who winked at me, his mischief undimmed. As we all soaked up the energy of this joyous moment, I looked at the cast on this stage and realized I couldn't have achieved what I had achieved without them, each one a piece of the puzzle that was my journey. No matter what I thought of them at the time, whether I'd feared, judged, or loved them, I now felt incredibly grateful, a deep, encompassing love for them all, flaws and all. They were part of me, and I of them, bound by the trials we'd shared. My heart swelled, full to bursting with affection and appreciation. Ogleflow lifted me down off his shoulders and dropped to one knee in front of me, his eyes locking with mine, steady and sincere. "I am so proud of you, young Finn," he said, his voice thick with emotion, each word a gift. I was shocked. He had used my name, Finn, not Fun, a recognition of the boy I was beneath the hero I'd become. The sound of it struck a chord deep within me, and I threw my arms around him, hugging him so tightly my arms ached, tears streaming down my face as I buried my head in his shoulder. The warmth of his embrace was a haven, a moment of connection that anchored me amidst the flood of emotions. Gratitude, love, and the bittersweet ache of knowing this chapter was ending. "It's time we moved on," he said, his voice gentle but firm, pulling back to meet my gaze. "Move on?" I said, my voice cracking with confusion and dread. "Where do we go from here?" The stage, the audience, and the cast melted gently away, dissolving into a brilliant light that enveloped us, radiant and all-consuming. This was something different. Normally, we would fall into darkness, a void of uncertainty, but this light was warm, alive. I looked around in complete awe and wonder, my breath catching at its beauty. It was like being surrounded by love, not the fleeting conditional love of earth, but a total unconditional love that permeated every fiber of my being, soothing every wound, filling every void. It was a love that knew no bounds, eternal and infinite, and I felt myself dissolve into it, weightless and whole. Ogleflow took my hand, his grip warm and steady, and we began to walk toward its source, our steps effortless, more like floating than walking, carried by the light's gentle current. My heart thrummed with anticipation, a quiet joy mingling with the awe that held me in its embrace. Up ahead, the light shimmered and began to form into two shapes, their outlines soft but growing clearer as we drew closer. As their features sharpened, I recognized one as my mother, her face as familiar as my own heartbeat, her eyes warm with the love I'd carried in my memory since I was small. My heart fluttered, a wild, uncontainable joy erupting within me, and I screamed with joy, a raw, exultant sound as I raced toward her, tears rolling down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. I crashed into her, folding my arms around her waist, clinging to her with the desperation of a child who'd thought her lost forever. All thoughts of standing before her like a man, proud and composed, were gone, swept away by the overwhelming need to be her boy again, to feel her arms around me. She hugged and kissed me, her hands stroking my hair with a tenderness that unraveled me, each touch a balm to the ache of her absence. I cried, "I miss you, I miss you," over and over again, the words a litany of longing, my voice breaking with each repetition, raw with the pain of years apart. She uncurled my arms from around her waist and knelt down before me, her eyes level with mine, soft and radiant. She dried my eyes with gentle fingers, her touch a quiet promise, and whispered gently, "This is your father." I looked up at him, my breath catching. He stood tall and proud, his presence steady, his face a blend of strength and kindness, etched with lines that spoke of a life well lived. He ruffled my hair, his hand warm and reassuring, and said, "Hello, Finn." His voice deep and warm, resonating with a quiet pride. "I have been watching you." The words struck me, a revelation that he'd been there, unseen, through my trials. "You have," I said, trying to regain my composure, my voice trembling as I wiped at my tear-streaked face, overwhelmed by the love radiating from him. He put his arm around my mother, drawing her close, and I could feel the love between them, a vibrant, living thing that vibrated through the light like ripples on a lake, touching everything in its path. It was a love that enveloped me too, wrapping me in its warmth, and for a moment I felt whole, complete in a way I'd never known. "We will be together someday, but not this day," he said, his voice steady but kind, tempered with a wisdom that softened the blow. "You have your life to lead." The words pierced me, a sharp pang of loss cutting through the joy. "But I want to stay with you," I cried, my voice breaking, desperation clawing at me. "I don't want to go back to my life. I hated that life." My mother's eyes softened, and she reached for my hand, her touch grounding me. "We will be with you," she said, her voice a soothing melody. "You will find us in your heart, but it's time for you to return." Her words were a promise, but they couldn't dull the ache in my chest. My father nodded, his expression warm but resolute, and Ogleflow put his hand on my shoulder, a steadying presence as my mother and father faded back into the source of the light, their forms dissolving into its radiance. My heart was broken. It was like losing them all over again, the pain as raw and searing as the day I'd first lost them. I tried to be brave, to hold back the tears, but they rolled down my cheeks, hot and unrelenting, as I watched them disappear, their love lingering like an echo in the light. Ogleflow spun me around, his hands gentle but firm, forcing me to face him. "It's time, young Finn," he said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of finality. "Time for what?" I replied, my voice thick with tears, dread pooling in my stomach. The light faded into darkness, a slow, inevitable shift, and we were where we began. Just me and Ogleflow, surrounded by darkness, the void pressing in around us. The transition was jarring, the loss of the light's warmth a physical ache. "What's happening?" I asked anxiously, my voice trembling, fear creeping in as the darkness tightened its grip. "It's time, young Finn," he said again, his tone gentle but unwavering, his eyes holding mine with a depth of understanding that both comforted and terrified me. I knew what he meant. The journey had come to an end, and now it had come to this point. I didn't want it. The thought of losing him, my guide, my friend, was unbearable. "Not you too," I cried, my voice breaking, tears spilling anew. "You can't leave me." "It's time, young Finn," he said again, his voice steady, a quiet farewell. "It's been a joyous journey, but now it's time for you to wake up." "Don't go, don't leave me," I screamed, my voice raw, tears streaming down my face as Ogleflow began to dance away, his movements light and graceful, a final performance. My heart was breaking, shattering into pieces, and my stomach tied itself in knots, a physical pain that mirrored the emotional torment. I reached for him, desperate to hold on, but he was slipping away, his form fading into the darkness. I watched, helpless, as Ogleflow faded into the darkness, his silhouette dissolving until I was left alone, the void swallowing the last traces of his presence. The loneliness was crushing, a weight that pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt strange, like I was being pulled downwards, a slow, inexorable descent. I could sense myself returning, the familiar feel of my room anchoring me, the faint creak of the floorboards, the soft rustle of my bedding. I opened my eyes and found myself staring at the mushroom in my hand, still whole, exactly as it was, its surface smooth and unblemished, a relic of the journey that felt both impossibly real and like a dream. I didn't understand. my mind reeling with confusion, and I broke down and cried as I had never cried before. The emotions, grief, longing, bewilderment, were overwhelming, a torrent that swept me under. I buried my face into my pillow and sobbed, the fabric muffling my cries, each one a release of the pain I carried. I must have cried myself to sleep because I woke with sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, its golden rays spilling across the floor, warm and gentle. I could hear the birds singing outside, their cheerful trills a stark contrast to the heaviness in my heart, and Auntie M moving around downstairs, the clatter of pots a familiar rhythm of normalcy. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, its cracks and stains a map of my solitude. I had never felt so alone, the absence of Ogleflow, my parents, and the vibrant world of my journey a gaping wound. I found myself wishing I had never gone on that journey, the pain of its loss too great to bear. For weeks I was in my own world, adrift in a fog of grief and disconnection, finding it difficult to readjust to my old life, its routines mundane and hollow. I missed Ogleflow fiercely, his laughter, his wisdom, his unwavering belief in me. Many times I would just sit and stare at the wall where we first met, its peeling paint a silent witness to our beginning, hoping somehow he'd step through again, his smile bright and his hand outstretched. The silence was deafening, and I felt like a stranger in my own skin, caught between the boy I'd been and the person I was becoming. Then one day, it just happened, a spark of the courage I'd found on my journey igniting unexpectedly. The school bully, someone who had made fun of me many times, his taunts a constant thorn, was bullying a young girl from another class, his words sharp and cruel. Something snapped within me, a quiet resolve, and I walked over, my steps steady despite the flutter in my chest, and pushed him to the ground, the impact solid and real. He tried to get up, his face a mix of shock and anger, and I pushed him down again, my hands firm. He hesitated, then tried again, and I pushed him down once more, my actions deliberate, driven by a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I could see fear in his eyes as he lay on the ground, looking up at me, his bravado crumbling. I held my hand out to him, a gesture of peace, not triumph. He had a confused look on his face, uncertain of my intent. I took a step closer, stretching down toward him, hand outstretched, open and steady. He took hold, his grip tentative, and I pulled him up onto his feet, the act a bridge between us. He brushed himself down, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and muttered a quiet sorry to the young girl before walking away. His shoulders slumped. "Are you okay?" I asked the young girl, my voice gentle, concern softening my tone. "I'm fine," she said, turning to walk off, her steps quick as if eager to escape the scene. Then, to my surprise, she turned back, her eyes bright with curiosity, and said, "Do you want to be friends?" My old self would have been embarrassed, stumbling over words, cheeks burning with self-consciousness. But to my surprise, I simply said, "Yes," my voice clear and confident, a reflection of the growth I hadn't fully realized. "My name is Meadow," she said, her smile warm, her name a spark that lit something within me, a connection to the meadow of my journey, yet wholly her own. "What's yours?" "Fun," I said, the word slipping out before I could catch it, a remnant of my journey's identity. Finn, I corrected, a flush of warmth rising in my cheeks. Meadow's eyes twinkled. "No, I like fun, and that's what I'll call you," she said, her voice playful but sincere. My heart swelled, a rush of joy so intense it hurt my cheeks, as a smile spread across my face, wide and unrestrained, mirroring the one I'd worn in the theater of light. The connection was immediate, a thread of friendship that felt destined, a new beginning born from a moment of courage. The bell rang for class, its sharp chime pulling us back to reality. "See you later, Fun," she said, her voice light, and walked away, her braids swinging with each step. I stood there, a stupid, giddy look on my face, rooted to the spot as her words echoed in my mind. Suddenly, I felt grounded, anchored in a way I hadn't since returning. I was back in my old life, but not as I was. It was my old life, but a new me, shaped by the trials and triumphs of my journey, carrying its lessons in my heart. We spent all our spare time together over the following years, Meadow and I, our friendship a new journey, one of laughter, shared secrets, and quiet moments that held deep meaning for me. She was a light in my life, a constant reminder of the courage I'd found, and though Ogleflow wasn't with me, I knew him well enough to hear his voice now and then, a whisper of encouragement in my quieter moments, guiding me still. At 14, I started to help the fishermen unload their catch, offering my time free of charge, driven by a desire to contribute, to be part of something larger than myself. At first, I was clumsy, my hands unaccustomed to the work, getting in the way more than helping, but I persevered, determined to prove my worth. When I became more of a help than a hindrance, they began to reward me, first with portions of their catch, the fish fresh and glistening, and later with small sums of money, coins that felt like tokens of trust. The work grounded me, its physicality a counterpoint to the emotional weight I carried, and I found pride in the calluses forming on my hands, each one a mark of my growth. As I took responsibility, helping Auntie M where I could, carrying groceries, tending the garden, easing her workload, our relationship deepened, the distance between us shrinking. We became close, our bond forged in quiet moments of shared labor and understanding, her sternness softening into a warmth that felt like family. Her pride in me was a quiet thing, expressed in a nod or a rare smile, and it filled me with a sense of belonging I'd thought lost. When she passed on, just as I turned 18, part of me was glad that she wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Her body frail from years of toil. But the loss cut deeply, and I knew I would miss her fiercely, her presence a cornerstone of my world. The grief was heavy, but it was tempered by the love we'd built, a foundation that held me steady. I asked Meadow to marry me when we were both 22 years old, my heart pounding as I knelt before her, the ring trembling in my hand. Thankfully, she said yes, her eyes shining with tears and love, and we were married that same year, our vows a promise of a shared future. Our life together was wonderful, a tapestry of joy woven from small moments, laughter over breakfast, quiet evenings by the fire, the warmth of her hand in mine. We had 2 beautiful children, their laughter a melody that filled our delightful home, its walls echoing with love. Meadow was my partner, my confidant, my knight in shining armor as much as I was hers, our bond sealed the first time we met, unbreakable and true. When she passed 4 years back, my heart was broken again, the pain a deep, jagged wound that refused to heal. This time the damage was too great, and I could not recover, the loss of her a shadow that dimmed even the brightest days. I carried on for our children, for the life we'd built, but a part of me remained tethered to her absence, a quiet ache that never faded. I sit here now in this chair, telling you my story, my voice frail, my body too weak to stand without help. I know I won't see another day, the weight of my years pressing against me, but as I look at this mushroom here in my hand, as fresh as the day I first saw it, its surface unmarred by time, I know that this is not the end, but the beginning of something new. The journey has taught me that the joy is in the journey itself, in the love, the lessons, the connections forged along the way. And as I close my eyes, I feel Ogleflow's hand on my shoulder, my parents' love in my heart, and Meadow's smile lighting the path ahead, ready to guide me into the next adventure. The beginning.